The emerging new world order: power, finance, AI, religion, and the architecture of global control. Synopsis: human civilization is undergoing a structural transformation, unlike anything seen since the collapse of the European colonial order. The traditional pillars of empire, territory, armies, and monarchy are giving way to a new architecture of global influence built on artificial intelligence, centralized finance, digital infrastructure, and ideological legitimacy. This article synthesizes two analytical frameworks examining this shift, presenting the Council of Eight model and eight interlocking layers of power: governments, finance, corporate AI systems, religious legitimacy, Africa's resource sphere, and the inevitable force of human resistance, that together constitute the emergent world order. Whether this system becomes authoritarian or balanced, centralized or multipolar, may be the defining question of the 21st century. End of the old order. For centuries, global civilization was organized around a familiar architecture of power. European empires backed by colonial resource extraction, aristocratic legitimacy, and Atlantic banking dynasties. The world was divided by territory, governed by monarchies, and financed by a relatively small network of dynastic institutions. That architecture is now fracturing. The symbolic death of Queen Elizabeth in 2022 is cited by many theorists as a cultural marker, the closing of an era that rather than simply the end of a reign. The Anglo-European order that once commanded global deference through empire, naval power, and financial dominance is being eclipsed by something fundamentally different in both form and function. The new order does not center on monarchy, colonial symbolism, or even traditional military empire. It centers on data algorithms, capital flows, infrastructure networks, and the invisible architecture of digital governments. Power has become less visible and for that reason, arguably, more difficult to resist. The trilateral power structure. At the government level, three major power blocks have emerged as the organizing centers of the new geopolitical reality: the United States and the Americas. The U.S. remains the dominant military power of the Western Hemisphere, the center of global reserve currency finance, and the leading developer of artificial intelligence systems. Its influence extends through cloud computing, infrastructure, satellite networks, media ecosystems, and the largest intelligence apparatus in human history. Many analysts see the current era of U.S. policy, with its emphasis on hemispheric integration, border consolidation, and trade restructuring, as a modernized Monroe Doctrine, the Western Hemisphere as a unified American sphere of influence. Russia and Eurasia. Russia functions as the military security anchor of Eurasia. Its power derives not from economic dynamism, but from economic nuclear deterrences, Arctic positioning, energy leverage, and geographic depth. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine and Russia's strategic positioning across Eastern Europe and Arctic corridors represent, in this framework, the consolidation of a Eurasian security zone, one that leaves Europe increasingly dependent on Russian energy and strategic realities rather than functioning as an independent pole. China and East Asia. China has positioned itself as the industrial engine of the emerging world system through the Belt and Road Initiative. It has extended infrastructure, financing across Asia, Africa, and beyond, and economic dependencies that create long-term strategic leverage without direct military occupation. China's unique contribution to the emerging order is the fusion of AI with manufacturing, logistics, and smart city infrastructure at a scale no other nation has ever attempted. The hidden layers: finance, AI, and religion. Governments are visible, but the analysis behind these frameworks argue that three less visible layers carry equal or greater weight in shaping the emerging order. The financial infrastructure. Most modern civilizations do not run on armies. It runs on debt, capital, and investment flows. Without financing, governments cannot wage wars, develop AI, build infrastructure, or maintain the social programs that sustain political legitimacy. This gives extraordinary influence to institutions like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and the network of central banking systems and sovereign wealth funds that collectively manage trillions in global capital. These institutions shape which industries grow, which governments receive credit, which energy transitions gets funded, and which AI systems receive investment. The next phase of this financial layer may be the most consequential: the emergence of digital currencies, programmable money, biometric identity systems, and AI-managed financial tracking. Critics warn this creates the infrastructure for unprecedented economic coercion, but supporters argue that it enables efficiency, transparency, and anti-corruption. Both may be correct. The corporate AI technology layer. Artificial intelligence rapidly becoming the nervous system of global power. It now connects surveillance, military targeting, communication monitoring, financial tracking, logistics, transportation, and predictive behavior analysis into a unified infrastructure. The critical insight of framework is this: the empire of the future may not require territorial occupation. Control increasingly operates through algorithmic governance, digital identity systems, financial access management, and infrastructure dependency. Major technology corporations operating across national borders with their revenues exceeding many national economies have become what the framework calls infrastructure states within states, their own governance of institutions, their own country, if you will. Religions and spiritual legitimacy. No civilization has ever survived on economics and technology alone. Humans require meaning, moral frameworks, and a sense of identity and purpose that purely technocratic systems cannot provide. Every major empire throughout history, Rome, Byzantine, the European monarchies, Imperial China, fused political authority with spiritual legitimacy. The emerging system is no different. Cities like Estonia and Kazakhstan has drawn analytical attention precisely because of their combination of interfaith congresses, symbolic architecture, Eurasian positioning, and globalist diplomatic imagery. The theory holds that the future governance system will require some form of moral ideological legitimacy, whether through interfaith cooperation frameworks, universal humanitarian ethics, or global value systems to maintain social cohesion alongside AI, finance, and technological control. Africa, the decisive variable. Perhaps the most unappreciated element in conventional geopolitical analysis is Africa's emerging strategic importance. The continent contains the majority of the world's cobalt, significant lithium reserves, rare earth minerals essential for AI hardware and battery technology, uranium, gold, and the largest concentration of the young population growth on Earth. They have the youngest working population on Earth of working age. As artificial intelligence and robotics expand, African resources become not merely economically important, but structurally essential to technological infrastructures of the new order. The United States, China, and Russia are already competing aggressively for African influence through military agreements, infrastructure investment, mining contracts, telecommunication systems, and financial partnerships. The framework resists treating Africa as simply a passive resource base. Depending on how Africa leadership evolves over the coming decades, the continent may emerge as a genuine balancing force between competing blocs, one capable of leveraging its resource wealth and population into a genuine strategic sovereignty rather than a new form of dependency. The Council of Eight. The synthesis of these two analytical frameworks produced what is termed the Council of Eight. Not eight equal governing bodies seated at a literal table, but 8 interlocking layers of global influence that come together constitute the emerging world system. The United States and the Americas, the Western Military Financial Technological Command. Russia and Eurasia. Eurasia as a security anchor and energy anchor. China and East Asia, industrial infrastructure, technological sphere. Global finance infrastructure, capital allocation, debt systems, and digital finance. Corporate AI technological systems, algorithmic governments, surveillance, infrastructure dependency. Religious and spiritual legitimacy structures. Moral cohesion, ideological identity, and interfaith frameworks. Africa, resource, population, and potential balancing spirit. Resistance and sovereignty coalitions, the permanent counterforce generated by civilization itself. What distinguishes this model from simpler conspiracy frameworks is its acknowledgement that no single actor controls the system. These 8 layers interact, compete, overlap, and generate unintended consequences. The result is not a perfectly engineered global governance, but a complex self-organizing planetary system in which power is exercised through infrastructure and finance as much as through law and force. The return of the Seven Nation Army. History offers one consistent lesson about centralized systems. They generate resistance. Every empire in recorded history, Ottoman, Roman, British, and Soviet, etc., eventually faced balancing coalitions, sovereignty movements, or the internal fragmentation that architects of those empires did not anticipate. The pattern is also consistent that the framework studied here give it a symbolic name drawn from the prophecy, mythology, and apocalyptic literature, the Seven Nation Army. Not 7 literal nations, but the recurring phenomenon of resistance coalitions forming against concentrated power. Anti-colonial movements, nationalist revivals, religious reformation, labor movements, popular surges across every era and every civilization. Excessive centralization produces its own opposition. In the AI age, this resistance takes new forms. Decentralized digital economies, cyber sovereignty movements, independent media ecosystems, religious revitalization, and cultural counter-narrative and regional populist blocs that reject technocratic governance. The 8th layer of the Council of 8 is not an invited participant in the system. It is the pressure release mechanism that the system itself generates, and a force that ultimately determines whether any given order endures or collapses. Critically, the frameworks resist the seductive conclusion that all resistance is managed or controlled. History repeatedly demonstrates that systems which believe they have contained opposition frequently discover they have not. The Soviet collapse, Arab Spring, and the wave of anti-colonial revolutions all shared one general feature. The governing systems did not see them coming. The final question, what kind of world order is emerging? The honest answer is, it depends on choices not yet made by governments, by corporations, by religious institutions, by ordinary people, and by the resistant movements that will inevitably form in response to whatever systems consolidates. The framework presented here is not a prophecy. It is a systems map, an attempt to name the forces currently in motion and trace their probable interactions. The most intelligently honest aspect of both source documents is the refusal to assign predetermined outcomes. The system could become technocratic and surveillance driven, concentrating power in AI managed financial and infrastructure systems, a multipolar and balanced with genuine sovereignty distributed across competing blocks, or fragmented by resistant movements that successfully challenge their centralized power, or ultimately some combination of all three, varying by region, culture, and outcomes of conflict not yet fought. What history suggests with near certainty is that whatever order emerges will not be permanent. Complex systems evolve, resistance arises, civilizations reorganize. The question, as the frameworks conclude, is not whether a new world order is emerging. It clearly is. The question is what kind of world order humanity will choose to allow, resist, or build in its place.
Attention passengers, we've now reached our destination. We hope you enjoyed the flight and have a nice day.